Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Can we dedicate this to Harlan as it's his birthday today?
Is this today?
Oh,
Absolutely.
wow.
Wow. Okay. Well, then we're going to dedicate it to Harlan Radinsky. And this evening is my dad's yahrzeit, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yes,
so we'll dedicate it also to Mayor Miller. David, good morning. Good morning. So
good morning. How are things with Harlan? Sorry, I missed that.
Let me just pause this a second. So we are actually discussing now, after God has given Moses the instructions regarding the tabernacle, how Bezalel has been designated to be the overseer and the planner, and to take these instructions and actually put them into practice. So we just started reading about that, and we're going to continue doing that. And the point that we're going to get to is that we're going to see that there's much repetition going on here. And in fact, we will see that the construction of the tabernacle is going to be discussed in these kinds of details quite a few ways. And I'm going to try and enumerate them as we do it. So I'm going to go to the share right now. Okay, there we are. And so here we were just told how Bezalel has the craftsmanship and the knowledge in which to oversee these particular things. So this next verse, I think, is actually an important one, and we'll see. Va'ani, and as for me, this is God speaking to Moses. Hine, behold, natati ito, I have placed with him et Oholiav ben Achisamach lemate Dan. I've placed next to him, with him, as his assistant, or first assistant, Oholiav, the son of Achisamach, from the tribe of Dan. And what's, I think, important about the fact that he's from the tribe of Dan is that Bezalel was from the tribe of Judah, which was like the premier tribe, and Dan was known as sort of the tail end of everything. And so in that sense, of course, we now have the entire spectrum of the Israelites being represented in an important kind of way. So just an interesting little note there. Let's keep going to the sentence. Uvelev kol chacham lev, and in the heart of all those who are wise of heart, natati chochma, I have given wisdom. Va'asu et kol asher tziviticha, and they will make everything that I have commanded you. And I think what's to be underlined is this top line here, the notion that the Torah states quite explicitly here, that whatever brilliance we have, whatever skills we have, whatever we have in that regard, instead of taking credit for ourselves, we should understand that it ultimately comes from God, and to recognize, I would say, the connection we have to the universe in which we were created. We are creatures of this universe. And so however it works out, whether it's through genetics, understanding this all through genetics, but it's nevertheless the way in which the universe was created and the way in which the universe operates. And since ultimately God is the creator of the universe, it also, everything we have ultimately comes from God. And I was reading yesterday a little section from Heschel, from the book that we're reading called Between God and Man. And I want to read this to you. So interesting.
Maybe it's just me, but you become very muffled.
Okay, I'm sorry. It could be that my book is covering the mic.
Now you're better.
Okay, so the book was covering the microphone. Thank you for letting me know. All right. Do I need to repeat anything?
If you rewind about 30 seconds, that would be great.
Okay. So I'm reading from a book called Between God and Man. It is from the writings of Abraham Joshua Heschel. and it's edited, selected, edited, and introduced by Fritz Rothschild. So this isn't a book that Heschel wrote, but the words in it are all from him. They're just organized in a particular way. And in this particular little section, we're talking about God's unity. And I found this particular paragraph really profound, and certainly in reflecting what we just read. The natural, quoting, the natural and the supernatural are not two different spheres. In other words, we can look and say, yeah, on the level of this reality, on this level of my consciousness, etc., that's one sphere. And then in recognizing something transcendent, and he's using the term supernatural, but I think we could just as well put in the word transcendent. In other words, this whole business that this little sentence is drawing out. Is there something that causes these things to happen on this plane? But what is remarkable, if not revolutionary, about the point that Heschel is bringing out is that they're not different planes. They're not two different spheres. That is to say, when we look at them as two different spheres, it's really a model, meaning it's a way in which to illustrate it so that we can understand it. But in its own reality, they are not two different spheres. And I'm going to go on. Detached from one another as heaven from earth. God is not beyond, but right here. Not only close to my thoughts, but also to my body. This is why man is taught to be aware of God's presence, not only by prayer, study, and meditation, but also in his physical demeanor, by how and what to eat and drink, by keeping the body free from whatever sullies and defiles. So this, I think, explains in so powerful a way another way of understanding the significance of performing mitzvot. Because when you perform a mitzvah, you are reflecting the divine in you, that is you. Okay, I'm going to go on with a few quotes that Heschel quotes from another source, from Deuteronomy Rabbah, and then from the Talmud Yerushalmi. Quote, this is from Deuteronomy Rabbah 2:6. An idol is near and far. God is far and near. And I would interpret that as saying that we look at idols such as money, such as power or human power, right? Such as fame or other kinds of things that we put our trust in and say, this is really what is going to give me happiness. And they seem so close to us. And the reason they're far is because they don't really do that. They're false in that regard. And God is far because we don't always make ourselves conscious of the transcendent level of existence. And yet God is really near. That if we were to open our eyes and our minds and our hearts, we would see in the way in which the very fact that our heart beats, the fact that we're able to take a breath, the miracle of existence, whether we're looking at plant life, human life, animal life, and even the stones and the planets and the stars and everything, that they are all, in a sense, divine, at least reflect a divine light. And another model that I sometimes like to use, or metaphor, is that existence. Remember, we brought this out in the word Vayomer back in Genesis, where it says, and God said, and I said to you, we could just as well translate it as God thought. So that it's not that we are divine inherently in the sense that we are gods, but we exist in the mind of God, that we're contained in God. And this is a quote now from Talmud Yerushalmi. God is far and yet nothing is closer than God. God is near with every kind of nearness. So again, just as I said, this is for me, this verse that we just looked at is the Torah stating explicitly that we might take a little bit of credit ourselves for whatever we do to develop our intelligence or to develop our personalities. We can take some credit for that. But the very fact that we have it to begin with, to work on, right? So maybe I can try another metaphor, that God provides us with the hardware, but the software we need to work on ourselves. So just this verse just made me think about this. And if there are any comments, of course, I'd be very happy to hear whatever you have to say in reaction to that. Okay, I'll go on. You can always comment.
So-
No, I got something.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to, so we can think of it more. Okay, I'm visual sometimes, so I'm looking at circles and things like that. So we're looking at a concentric circle, a circle within a circle, and that the supernatural is the big circle and the natural is the little circle.
And we can do
If you want to go there, our transcendence, because we need to break out of our little to get get into that. And the same way that if God is, if we're within God, then instead of God being within us, so that it makes it God-centered and not human-centered.
Right. And yet God can also be within us, so
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely.
So if we
because it's all that's a given.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So but think about it, I love what you said. I would
Yeah.
add to what you're saying is this is an attempt on our part to struggle and understand better what we mean when we say God is one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's it. No, that's really I like this is, you almost need the visual because it's not a Venn diagram. It's not, it's like it's not some of us is there and some of it's not. It's a circle within a circle.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
David, I think you said you had something to add?
No, I was just curious, you also talked about the physical, versus the spiritual aspects, or portion of it, and developing, not only the spiritual, but developing the physical, because God is close to us physically as well. So then that made me wonder, does that mean that, like the Romans and those cultures had it sort of half right? Because, or is it just wrong in terms of, because they took extreme measures, right? Because the body is a temple, those kinds of aspects in terms of developing physicality. But is it they did it for the wrong reasons, or or is it that they partially had it right? They got one half right, but not the other half.
Right.
I'm just curious.
So I've never thought of it like that. Honestly, you're introducing a whole new way of thinking for me. My gut feeling is to say they got it partially right. That's what, I mean. I'm sorry because I'm not willing to just write them off. Period. Maybe we can write off the Canaanites. Those 7 Canaanite nations, but it's limited to that, or the Amalekites, and that's about it. All right. And as far as I'm aware, they don't really exist in the way that at least the pshat appears to be. That is a simple explanation, at least at the text. But as if some of you saw the little piece I sent on Facebook, and you've heard me talk about it before, is to look at the Amalekite in us, or to understand the 7 Canaanite nations as elements of our own personalities that we need to really, really attend to and look into in terms of trying to perfect ourselves. I mean, rather than picking on others, that the real challenge is ourselves. By the way, you mentioned that the body is a temple. I find that to be very, very much what's going on here. And I think we talked about it actually with the Malcolm, that understanding. So, of course, that whole issue of Greek culture and Greek religion and stuff like that, I think we really need. It's a whole other subject. I mean,
Yeah.
other universe in a way, because understanding exactly what the Greeks were saying in what appears to be polytheism, is much more sophisticated than I think we're willing to accept. Sophisticated doesn't mean that it's going to be my religion, but at least I want to be able to understand what is very positive about it and helpful. So
that helps. That was kind of what I was thinking at first, at first brush, but I didn't know if there was any like additional thoughts or commentary or things like that you would have in mind on this. But that's this helps a lot. I really appreciate it.
By the way, there are some very good works that do contrast and compare Hebrew civilization with Greek civilization. I think there might be a book called Rome and Jerusalem that in fact do that. I'd have to look it up, and I've never read it, obviously, but it does sound like a title that might lend itself to that kind of consideration. I think there's been some good scholarship on this particular subject that you're raising. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go on just a little bit more. So now, as you see here, I mentioned this is now the second time we're going to mention these objects again. And what I want you to understand is that when you love something, when something is very, very, very important to you, then you talk about it a lot. And you don't find it irrelevant or boring to repeat it many times. And it's just part of human nature. And in a way, that is what the Torah is bringing out here in these many mentions of the various components of the tabernacle, etc., etc. So we're talking about God giving Moses the instructions. We're talking about Moses giving the instructions or the task to Bezalel. We're going to talk about fabricating these things. We're going to talk about putting them together, etc., etc. So we're going to break it down in that particular kind of way, deconstruct. Okay. So here we are at Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, the et ha'aron la'edut, and the ark, and of course it just means a cupboard or a box, la'edut for the testimony. Rashi's going to tell us what exactly is that meaning. The et ha'kaporet, the kaporet was the ark cover with the cherubim on it, asher aleha, which is upon it. And by the way, I think one other translation of kaporet, because you can see kippurim in here, lechaper, to atone. So I think sometimes it's maybe referenced as the mercy seat. Okay, and partially because the tabernacle had several functions. One very, very important function, of course, was to assist people in atoning. We need to be able to correct our mistakes and move on from there as best as we can. But certainly, of course, there was opportunity for thanksgiving and acknowledgement of God's miracles and things like that. It wasn't just seeking forgiveness and atonement. The et kol klei ha'oil, and all the vessels of the tent. Let's take a look at Rashi. Oh, sorry. Okay, I need to go back here. This was the verse that we had done before. We went on to the next verse. So I'll do these two verses. Uvelev chol chacham lev, and in the heart of those who are wise, of all those who are wise of heart. But od sha'ar. So what this is referring to, because he mentioned Bezalel, he mentioned Oholiav, but for od sha'ar chachmei lev, where he's also mentioning the rest of those who were wise in heart, shebachem, that are among you, v'chol asher natati bo chokhmah, and anyone to whom I have given wisdom, va'asu et kol asher tziviticha, let them make everything that I have commanded you. Et ha'aron la'edut, and the ark for the testimony, the tzorech lochot ha'edut. So he says there's just a little couple of words that are missing out here or implied, which means for the need of the tablets of the testimony. And the testimony in this, again, it's another way to enlighten us as to how to look at those 10 commandments. The fact that God has given us those 10 commandments, or given humanity those 10 commandments, is absolutely a sign of love. It's a sign of concern. At the very least, it shows that God cares, that this transcendent existence cares about how we as individuals behave. So that's the testimony. That's the witness, that these tablets, in a sense, witness that fact as to this relationship that the divine has with us as human beings. A little bit more. Let's make sure I get the, okay. Ve'et hashulchan, the table, ve'et kelav, and its vessels, ve'et hamenorah haTorah, and the pure candlestick or lampstand, right? Because candlestick seems a little strange. It didn't have candles. It burned oil, okay? So lamp, but we're talking about that large lamp stand that stood in the tabernacle. Ve'et chol keleha, and all its vessels, ve'et misbach hakatoret, and the altar for the incense. So you can see how we're enumerating these things, which we already know about. HaTorah. So we are talking about the pure lampstand. Al Shem Zahav Tahor. The reason Rashi tells us is that it's called pure is in reference to the pure gold that it was made from. Remember, it was beaten out of a block of pure gold. A little bit more. Ve'et Mizbach HaOlah, and the altar for the burnt offering. Ve'et Kol Kelav, and all its vessels. Ve'et HaChior, and the laver. Ve'et Kano, and its base. Is there any Rashi on this? No, there's no Rashi. Ve'et Vigdei Hasrad. So this Vigdei Hasrad is all of a sudden appears to be, I think, a relatively new idea, and Rashi's going to have to explain it to us. So he says the service cloths or clothes, Ve'et Bigdei HaKodesh, and the sacred garments, the Aharon HaKohen, for Aaron the priest, Ve'et Bigdei Vanav Lachahen, and the clothing of his sons in order to minister. They had to wear these uniforms to minister. So let's do this. Ve'et Bigdei Hasrad. So this is Rashi's going to say, Omer Ani, I say, Lefi Pshuto, according to the simple meaning, Shel Mikra, of the scriptural verse, She'i Efshar Lomar, that you cannot understand this, you can't say, Shebevigdei Kahuna Midaber, that this Bigdei Hasrad is referring to the clothing and the garments of the priests. Lefi Shenemar Etzlam, because right next to it, it says, Ve'et Bigdei HaKodesh, it's the Aharon HaKohen, and the holy garments for Aaron and his priest, Aaron the priest, Ve'et Bigdei Vanav Lechahen, and the garments of his sons in order to minister. So it's got to be something else entirely. Ela Elu Bigdei Hasrad, but he says these Bigdei Hasrad, Hem Bigdei Hatchelet. This is referring to the clothes or the cloths of blue, v'ha'argaman, and purple, v'tolat shani, and crimson yarns. Ha'omorim beParshat Masaot, that are referenced in the Parsha of Masaot. In other words, Mas'eh. Again, in the journeyings, this is where it talks about how they disassembled and moved all the pieces of the tabernacle. Okay. And that's in Numbers chapter 4. V'natnu alav, this is what it says, V'natnu alav beged chelet, they shall place upon it, this is the furniture of the tabernacle, V'natnu alav beged argaman, and on that they shall place a cloth of purple. V'natnu alehem beged tolat shani, and over that they shall put a cloth of crimson yarns. V'nir in dvarai, and he says, and I have support for what I'm saying. What I'm saying makes sense. Shne'emar, because in Shmot Lametet, because in Exodus chapter 39, it says, Umin hatchelet v'hargaman, and from the blue and the purple, v'tolat hashani, and the crimson yarns, asu bigdei hasrad, make these service garments or cloths, l'sharet b'kodesh, in order to minister in the holy place. Velohis karshesh, but there nothing is mentioned about linen, about the white linen. And remember, Aaron's garments had the linen in it as well, and they're not mentioned here. Okay, imahem is with them. The im bivigdei kahuna midaber, and if in fact bigdei hasrad is referring to the clothing of the priesthood, lo matzinu be'echad mehem. Argaman utolat shani below shesh. We never find, purple or crimson yarns without the mention of white linen when it comes to their clothes. So that's how we can tell that Bigdei Hasrad is something else entirely. So he says, Bigdei Hasrad. Yesh mefarshin. There are those who interpret this lashon avodah v'sherut. Okay, and they say these cloths are essentially tarpaulins. So they are, that the srad, this word srad, has the meaning of service, right? Work and service. Ketargumo, right up here, you see levoshe shimosha, clothing of service. Ketargumo levoshe shimusha. The ein lo dimyon b'mikra, and there is not this word srad in this kind of context, doesn't appear elsewhere in scripture. V'ani omer, and I say, this is Rashi giving his own opinion, shehu lashon arami, and he says this word srad is actually Aramaic, ketargum shel kilayim, as the targum of the hangings, the targum shel michbar, and it's also the Aramaic word that is used for the great michbar, shayu arugim b'machat. So the michbar must be some kind of netting, some sort of netting that we're talking about that was out of cloth that were. And in this case, arug generally it means ariga is knitting. B'machat, but with a needle. So we're talking in a sense about crochet work. Asuyim nikavim, which are made with all kinds of, literally a nekev is a hole. Okay, so loops, and look at this, lasidin, something like that. And I think that's the word laced, the las in Old French, and schlingwerk. And that's so, in other words, you see the word sling, right? So it's a kind of a bow. It's what he's talking about. And I believe it's the Yiddish for crocheted. And we'll stop right here. And please God, we'll be able to do this again at some point. Thank you. So if you'd like to comment at all.
I have a question.
Yes.
Actually, going back to the priestly vessel, the priestly clothing.
Yes.
Did the high priest wear that every day or only on Holy of Holies and special occasions?
Yes.
And did he have like service vestments that, just the everyday wear?
So this clothing the high priest would wear when he went in to serve. Okay, whether
Right.
he went every single day, I'm not sure. Obviously, there was time off. When he wasn't on time off, he'd get out of this uniform and wear whatever garments one typically wore in those days. But
Unless he was expected to wear something that people so they could identify him easier in a crowd or
there's
something like that.
Okay, so there's nothing that supports that necessarily. On the other hand, it talks about how they wrapped these things up when they had to move them. That it was important for them, just like nowadays, they use tarps when they move.
Right. Sure.
So as not to damage them.
Well,
And
they had the dolphin skin.
okay, so, yeah. So
Yeah.
those okay. So it mentions that on the on top of the tabernacle as well.
Mhm.
So with this, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
And,